Hi friend, welcome back to the channel where we focus less on trying and more on being the best version of ourselves. If you're new, welcome. I'm Aisha. On this channel, we talk about conscious manifestation, reality creation, deciding to have the things you want. If you're interested in one-on-one help with that, everything you need to know is in the description box below. You'll find a link to my website where you can check out my coaching options. I also have my Substack where you can sign up for free newsletters, or you can subscribe to get extra content. If you're looking for guided meditations, sleep tracks, hypnosis, EFT tapping, breath work, and literally so much more, check out the Aura app. I use Aura every single day, and it is such an important tool on my and many other people's spiritual and manifestation journey. There's so much content to explore. Go on there and take a look. You can use the link below to start your 7-day free trial. And if you love it as much as I do, you can also use that link to get 25% off of your membership subscription. That big thank you to Aura for partnering with me to help make this more accessible for you guys. Go over there, take advantage of what they have to offer. And with all that being said, let's get started on today's video. Today's topic of discussion. If you are manifesting something and you're getting opposite results, you don't even have to be getting opposite results necessarily, but if you feel like you are constantly triggered, if you feel like you're waiting around, if you feel like you're still looking at the same things, the same circumstances, and you're trying not to let whatever's happening in the 3D affect your mental state. How do you do that when maybe shit's hitting the fan in the 3D, maybe things are not necessarily moving as quickly as you would like them to, or you feel like circumstances are causing you to feel pulled back into the old story? What do you do when the 3D is not cooperating? First of all, why is it that when you start changing your mental diet, when you start focusing on the things that you want to have, you go back into the 3D and the 3D seems to throw you a going away party of sorts? It's like, oh, you think you're leaving? Oh, well, do you remember this? And do you remember that this is how things work in your reality? And do you remember how this person treated you? What if they did that again? Oh, you remember that situation you didn't want to be in? And the fact that you're trying to change your awareness so that that doesn't happen anymore? How about we do that again? How about the 2.0 version of that? And you're like, how about no thank you? And you're trying to stay in the state of not being bothered, of just, I'm gonna focus on my own awareness, and I know that I get to choose. I'm just gonna keep choosing to be the version of myself that I wanna be, keep seeing things the way that I want to see them. And then 3D trying to convince you to stop making your choice, to stop being the version of yourself who you know you get to be. Why does this happen? My understanding of this, and the way that I choose to see it, is when you are making a shift from being a certain version of yourself to shifting to a reality that is far removed from the reality that you were occupying previously. You are now an anomaly in that reality. You don't make sense in the old version world. You're no longer the old version of you because you've embodied a new state of consciousness, but you are existing in that old story in the 3D. Things are still playing out throughout the bridge of incidents that are getting you to that desired reality, but in the meantime, you're walking through whatever current reality is, and you're following the path of least resistance, whatever that bridge is that's going to get you from point A to point B. So while you are being the new version and you're occupying the old reality is like, what the fuck? You don't belong. You're not supposed to be here. It is reality's job to keep everything balanced, to keep things harmonious and aligned, because we know that a certain version of you correlates with a certain reality. So if your future version of you already occupying the old reality, that doesn't make any sense. So you have two choices. Your reality is either going to try to bring you back into balance with that old reality, suck you back into the old story, or you maintain being that version of yourself, you maintain your choice, you remain faithful to that until you get to the new reality that you're supposed to be occupying as that version of yourself. While you're still occupying that old reality, maybe an old circumstance, maybe some evidence of the old story might come along and try to convince you that, hey, this is how things work here. The version of you that belongs here believes this and sees things this way and has these types of things happening to them. In my personal belief, I think yes, it's because you are disturbing the balance. You are no longer the version that corresponds with that old reality. If you decide not to be the old man anymore, now there's a gap missing. There's no old man occupying that reality. You are now the new version of yourself occupying the old reality on your way to the new reality. That's why the reality might try to convince you with opposite results, with the same circumstances happening again, with thoughts and feelings of doubt, of fear, of anxiety. All of these things are not necessarily trying to harm you, but they're trying to restore the balance. But I'm gonna read a little bit more from Reality Transurfing because I think that it's important to understand. It can kind of be a little bit of a mental load to take on, trying to understand the language that Vadim Zeland uses. It's like, what are pendulums, what is excess potential, what are balanced forces, and all this stuff that goes with the transurfing method, if you will. That's why we're going to dive deeper into it on the Substack. But I want to talk about pendulums. If you haven't heard me speaking about pendulums before, basically a pendulum is just a thought structure. Thoughts, ideas, beliefs that people feed into over time. And they gain energy, they gain momentum, and they become powerful. And they want to keep people's attention and focus because that's how they continue to survive. Basically, think of a pendulum as the old man. So your old beliefs, your old identity trying to survive. The old man has a right to exist because it's a version of you just like all the other versions of you are allowed to exist. So when you try to take your awareness away from it and go be a different version of yourself, it feels like that pendulum or the old version of you or the old story is dying. It needs your energy to survive. It needs your focus and your attention to survive. That's, long story short, what a pendulum is. A pendulum is not necessarily good or bad. It's just a certain set of thoughts or an overarching idea that you fed into for a long time. If your identity is attached to a pendulum, such as I'm not worthy, things are always hard for me, things never work out in my favor, I've always been unlucky in relationships, it's always been difficult for me to have a healthy body, I've never been the smart one, I'm never the one that gets chosen. All of those go into an overarching pendulum. Let's say the pendulum is unworthiness. Continuing to focus on and feed that pendulum creates an attachment to it. It's just an attachment to a certain set of beliefs and thoughts. When you choose to break away from the pendulum, the way that you do that says a lot about how successful you are going to be in making that shift. Because like I said, if you want to think about it as a pendulum, you can think about it like that. If you want to think about it as just the structure of reality or the nature of life, you can think about it like that. Whether or not the pendulum is good or bad, once you are choosing to take your attention away from it, or once you start to fight the pendulum and want to be removed from it, you are disturbing the balance. Especially if it's something that you think is really important, and especially if you start giving it attention in the other direction. This idea of defeating the pendulum or burying the old man, death to the old man. I know some people think it's really funny when I talk about burying the old man and digging up graves and things like that. But if you've read Neville Goddard, you know he speaks about the old man. It's just the old version of yourself. But what you don't want to do with the old man or with the pendulum is to square up to it and try to fight it and try to defeat it that way through brute force. It's more like sneaking away. It's more like being like, hey, what's that? And then just like running in the other direction and just like not looking back. Just ignore it. It's not there. Stop looking at it. It's not there. So let's hear what Vadim Zeland has to say about defeating the pendulum. I'm going to read you multiple excerpts from this, but we're going to kind of break it down so that it's not so confusing to understand. It's from Defeating the Pendulum from Reality Transurfing. It says, firstly, the more actively you try to fight off pendulums that get you down, the more they will pressure you. You can repeat endlessly, leave me alone, get away from me, and think you are fighting them off, but actually you're just providing them with energy and making them cling to you even more. Secondly, you do not have the right to judge or change anything. Everything you see and experience should be accepted as if they were paintings on display, whether you like them or not. There may be many paintings in an exhibition that are not to your taste, but it would never occur to you to demand that they be removed from the exhibition room. Once you have recognized the pendulum's right to exist, you also have the right to leave it behind, remaining free of its influence. The main thing is not to fight it, judge it, get angry, or lose your self-control, because by doing so, you agree to play the game. The pendulum should be calmly taken for granted as a necessary evil and left at that. Any position of opposition supplies the pendulum with energy. So think about the pendulum as the old story, the intrusive thoughts, the opposite results, the circumstances. What he's saying is any attempt to square up to the pendulum, to square up to the old story, to try to fight off the old version of yourself or those thoughts that you don't want anymore is you still feeding into the pendulum. It's basically like your intention is to be rid of it, right? At the end of the day, what you want is for those circumstances to no longer be there, for those thoughts to no longer be there, for you to be occupying the version of reality that you want to be in, right? It's like, how do I get this thing to go away that I won't stop staring at? The implication there, that you'd even need to be checking for it, that you'd even need to be fighting it, that you'd even need to be opposing it, or flipping thoughts, or doing some method to try to make something go away, or trying to avoid something happening, is that the thing is still there. So it doesn't matter if you're feeding into it and saying, okay, I submit, yeah, things are like this, yeah, that circumstance is there, oh well, I guess it's just gonna be this way. Or you being like, no, you don't exist, you're not real, that's not how it's gonna be, and whatever, and I don't even care that you just did this, and that, and that, and that, and that, and also that I was sitting here watching you do and waiting for the next thing, and yep. Saying that is one thing. But you looking at it dead in the eye and being like, why aren't you going away? Why aren't you going away? Why aren't you going away? I wonder if it's because you still keep staring at it and asking it to go away when the goal is just to be in the state where it's not there. I think that the most important thing to recognize is when opposing circumstances are in your face, it is not your job to try to change things or try to make things go away. I think this is so important, which is why I keep talking about it. You are not going to change those circumstances. You are not going to change that old version of yourself, the old version of events, the old version of that reality. You're not going to change it. It's supposed to be there. It has a right to exist. Those pendulums have a right to exist, whether or not you like it, like with a certain political party, like with a certain ideology, like with certain beliefs. When people think this is the right way to do things, this is morally right, this is ethical, we should operate in this way, otherwise you're this kind of person. Feeding into it at all, whether it's for it or against it, is still playing into the pendulum's game. Because the point is not to sway you to a certain side of anything. No matter what, if you're focusing on some problem to be solved, you are still giving your energy to the problem. Baseline. That's what you need to know. The pendulum does not care if you're for it or against it. Pendulum does not care if you like what's happening or if you don't like what's happening, but you continuing to focus on it is what matters, because you're still feeding it the energy and it can still gain momentum from that. So by actively trying to fight it off, by trying to mentally arm yourself, by trying to flip every thought, by trying to revise every little thing that happens frantically, by trying to manipulate things and control things and change things, you're not understanding that all of those things, whatever's happening in the 3D, whatever the opposite results are, they're allowed to be there. Especially once you recognize that you are occupying a reality that is not in alignment with who you've chosen to be. So it does not matter what's happening in that reality, because you're on your way out anyway. Whatever's happening there can continue to happen there because it's supposed to happen there, because that is reality number blah, 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 where this set of things happens, which is why you were experiencing that when you were the version of yourself that was aligned with that reality. But now that you're not, you have to remain being the version of yourself who knows that things get to play out a certain way for you in order to get to the reality where the circumstances you do prefer to see are being played out. Both realities get to exist, whether you like it or not. Those versions of you get to exist, those versions of other people get to exist, those versions of the circumstances get to exist, whether you like them or not. Whether you think they're good or you think they're bad, or whether you don't care. They get to be there. There's nothing that you're ever gonna do to change that, because creation is finished. Because everything that is in existence has always existed and always will. So your job is not to fight it. Your job is not to try to avoid it. Your job is not to try to make it go away. Your job is to be the version of yourself you know you're supposed to be being in order to get the things that you want. Nobody's forcing you to do anything, but if you want a certain set of results, then you have to be the version of yourself that's capable of maintaining that state. That's not a version that's fighting. That's not a version that's efforting. That's not a version that's trying. That's a version that's being. You don't do anything. You remain in the state of being unbothered. That thing's happening, okay, I know where I am. Is that where I want to stay? No, I'd prefer not to. So am I going to focus on it? No. What would I prefer to see? This. Am I going to focus on that? Yes. What if this thing comes back up? Okay. Information, feedback, make it a neutral thing. It doesn't mean anything about you, who you are, what you get to have, who you get to be. It just tells you where you are. It's like dropping your location. It's like your own internal GPS. Because if you're seeing something happening in the 3D that you don't like and it's making you feel bad, that tells you you're still attached to that pendulum, you're still feeding it energy, you're still attached to that story, you're still identified as the old man. So that should tell you, oop, there's something that I'm believing that's still not in alignment with getting me where I want to be. Let me pinpoint that. Let me switch that out for something that I actually want to believe. And then let me put my focus back where I want it to be. That's all that means. It's just course correcting. So you have to be content with that. You have to be content with knowing that there is nothing that ever needs to be changed and you are not going to be the one to change it. Yes, sometimes we use these words, but right now I'm harping on the semantics of it because I want you to understand. When I say change, I always mean to occupy the preferred version, to see things the way that you want them to be, not to take something that's already there and make it into something else, because you're not making anything. You're not creating anything. You are choosing. You are deciding out of things that are already available to you, possibilities that are already available to you. They're already there. So if you're seeing something that you don't want to see, understand that, hey, I've just become aware of my own preference. What I actually want to see is probably the opposite of what's happening. So instead of fighting that thing that is never going to change, that is always going to be there because it has a right to exist, I am going to find the possibility that I like. I'm going to lock in on that. I'm going to continue to focus on that. And I'm just going to keep moving in that direction. But to be content with allowing things to be there, to just happen, to be truly unbothered, to not be worried about opposite results or how long things are taking or what's happening in the 3D at all ever, you have to accept that it's there. That is what acceptance is. That understanding that I'm not going to change this thing because it's not supposed to be changed. Nothing is supposed to change ever. The way that we use the word change is not necessarily in line with the intention of what it is that you're actually doing. But for ease of understanding, we use that word, right? Obviously, you could still say the word change. I still use the word change, but I want you to understand what I'm actually saying, what I actually mean by change. You're not making anything happen that has not already happened. You're not making anything appear that was not already there. You're not making anything go away that was already not there. You are choosing to alter your own awareness. You're choosing to shift your focus to something else. Instead of looking at this, I'm gonna look at that. That thing is still allowed to be there, and that does not take away from my choice to remove my attention from it and to look at this. And I know that the longer that I look at this, that thing is going to cease being important. It's not gonna matter. It's not gonna have anything to do with me. Because the longer that I put my attention on this, I'm building my own pendulum. I'm choosing to put my focus and my attention here and feed this. And that thing is going to starve and die off and go back to a reality where people are focusing on it, where people are giving it its attention, because that's where it can thrive. If it knows that coming to me is not going to get it any attention, it's not going to get any kind of emotional reaction out of me, I'm not going to care, then it's going to go find somebody who will. I want more of the pendulums, more of the thought ideas, more of the experiences, more of the choices, more of the possibilities that I actually prefer to come running after me because they know that they can get energy from me. And when I say they, and when we're talking about these pendulums, remember that this is a concept to help you understand. There's nothing outside of you. Pendulums can't hurt you. Pendulums are not some outside entity still. It's your own energy. It's your own thought structures that you're building, your own belief systems, your own concepts of reality, of yourself, of your own identity that you're feeding into. And if you use it positively, it can only positively affect you. Say, I'm building this pendulum of the desired version of myself, of the version of me who always gets what I want, of the version of me who is unbothered, of the version of me that couldn't give less of a shit what's happening in the 3D because I know that whatever is happening, I chose it to be there and I like it. Feeding into that is going to start building the momentum for more things that are in alignment with that to happen for you. So instead of fighting off the old pendulum, accept that it's there. Hey, you're here, you're vibing, cool. Guess what? I'm here too. And as much as you get to make that choice, I get to make my choice. But I no longer prefer to exist in this reality. I no longer prefer to see things this way. I'm gonna pass. No thanks. Instead of fighting off negative thoughts, trying to flip every single thought, just say, hey, no thank you. I'm not gonna play this game with you anymore. I'm not gonna do the back and forth. I'm not gonna tussle with you because I'm bored or I'm tired or I have other things to do, better realities to be in. So my next quote says, to decline something, you have to first accept its existence. The word accept in this context does not mean to embrace something and let it into your personal space. It means simply to recognize its right to existence and then pass it by indifferently. To accept and let go of something means to consider the meaning of something and let it pass, waving goodbye as it leaves. This is much more effective than letting something into your personal space, becoming attached to something, and then trying to oppose it. So that's all acceptance means. I think people get a little bit up in arms of like, why would I accept this shitty thing that I don't want to be happening? It's not accepting it as your own. It's not accepting it as a part of your identity. It's simply accepting its right to exist just as everything else in existence has a right to exist. Before you can say, no, thank you, I don't prefer that, that's not my choice, you have to acknowledge that yes, it is there. But the part that throws you off, the part that gets you stuck, is when you're saying, no, I don't want it, and you're refusing it. You're saying, no, no, thank you, no, no, thank you, no, no, thank you, no, no, thank you. And you keep going back to it and keep validating that it's there and that it's something that has a right to keep imposing its presence on you. Once you accept, yes, you have the right to exist, I also have the right to choose what I want to be true for me in my reality, the things that I want to see. You're not a part of that image. Thank you, goodbye. Go try it somewhere else. You'll have better luck with somebody who's more susceptible to thoughts and ideas like that. Those thoughts and ideas don't align with my self-concept. I don't see myself as that person. Try the neighbor. Try the milkman. It's not gonna be me. It's not gonna be me. So once you understand that it is just as much as a valid choice as the choice that you actually do want to make, it's not that big of a deal to just let it pass you by, to just say, no, thank you. Because it has no right to impose itself on you if you don't give it that power over you. You just say, I understand that this is an available option. I understand that this is an available option. For me, this option makes me feel a certain way. I've placed this meaning onto it. So because that meaning doesn't feel good, I know that this must not be my preferred choice. So I'm gonna let you go because I understand that you can't hurt me now that I've recognized what it is you're doing and I've recognized that I don't agree to participate. Thank you, be on your way. This, on the other hand, I like this. Looks good. I'm gonna keep focusing on this. I'm gonna keep putting my attention on this because this is the way that I prefer things to be. Now, I could choose to go back to seeing this thing this other way if it keeps showing up and I keep looking at it and being like, hey, back off, hey, back off, hey, back off. But if I'm focusing here, I could choose to be so enamored and so in love with and so lovingly attached to what it is that I actually want to see that when this thing comes up, I'm like, ooh, I'm not even gonna waste my time looking at that. That guy over there, I know if I just keep looking at this, he'll go away because I'm not giving him what he wants. Pendulum goes bye-bye. If you know this, if you know that the value of all things is nothing other than the meaning that you place on it, does anything that's happening in the 3D actually matter ever? No. No matter how good, bad, or indifferent you feel about it, it truly does not matter. Everything is neutral at baseline. The only thing that attaches meaning to things and makes you feel a certain way about things is the identity that you are aligned with currently. Who you say you are currently, who you are being right now. That's your self-concept. Your self-concept and your ideas and beliefs that you are feeding into your own personal pendulums are what gives things in your life meaning. It's what makes things feel important to you. Because obviously the things that are important to you might not mean anything to the next person. That's a personal choice. It's a personal belief system built off of your own experience. So really, once you become aware that it's not something that you want, you just have to commit to no longer caring. You have to commit to no longer fighting with it, no longer making it such a big deal because you know it's not something that you want and you know that continuing to focus on it is going to give you more of what you don't want. So you're going to choose to start focusing on the things that you actually do want to focus on. And you're going to know that as long as it's there, you trying to do anything to make it go away or change it is only going to exacerbate the problem. So there's nothing really for you to do except the things that are actually aligned with the version of you that you want to be. Do the things that make sense for living out your desired truth, your desired reality, for having the things that you want to have. Who cares what's going on with the pendulums? Who cares what's going on with the opposite circumstances? They have nothing to do with you. Things that are not happening in your favor in reality have nothing to do with you because you are the version of yourself who gets everything you want, who everything is working out perfectly for. So if things are not working out perfectly, that thing must be on its way out. It must be leaving. It must be irrelevant. Any choice to do anything otherwise, like fight with the circumstances, like try to change them, like think that you're doing something wrong, like try to fix things, is a vote for the old story. It is playing into the pendulum's game. It is continuing to feed your energy into something you've already decided that you no longer want. Like think of it as your manifestation garden. You have the seeds that you planted intentionally, and you have some weeds that might pop up here and there. Now, if you don't pull the weeds, and instead you start watering those too, you start fertilizing the weeds, and you start neglecting the seeds that you planted, what do you think is gonna happen? Now, if you go in and you decide, I didn't plant these weeds intentionally, I planted these seeds, I planted these beautiful flowers, I planted these vegetables, I planted these fruits, I planted these trees, these are mine. These are my thoughts, these are my desires, these are my intentions for myself. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna pull these weeds so that I can allow the seeds I planted to thrive. Now, if you go in and you pull the weeds and then you get out a magnifying glass You're checking to see if new sprouts of the weeds are growing. In that time, you're neglecting the seeds that you planted. You're neglecting your new sprouts, the ones that you actually want to be there. You've forgotten to water those seeds. You've forgotten to fertilize those seeds, forgotten to till the soil or whatever you do. I'm not a gardener, but it's pretty clear to see that if you're sitting there with a magnifying glass on the problem, even after you've decided that you've handled it, it's dealt with, and you're sitting there waiting for another problem to pop up or trying to circumnavigate having to go through a similar situation again when there's actually nothing that's happening, then what do you think you're doing? You're asking for it. You're egging it on. That is exactly what that pendulum wants. For you to continue to keep your attention on the things that you actually don't want, and in the meantime, you're neglecting the things that you actually do. You're taking your focus and attention off of where it actually should be, and you're putting it on the problem instead of being the solution. So whether or not you think that you're actually doing a good thing, it's like, oh, well, I'm tilling the garden. I'm pulling the weeds. I'm making sure that no bad things are here. I'm spraying pesticides. I'm making sure that these seeds can grow successfully. But in the meantime of putting all your focus and attention on a problem, you're forgetting that you are the solution. You're forgetting to nurture the things that you actually want. You're more focused on destruction, on breaking down the pendulum, on breaking down the old story, on breaking down the old circumstances, instead of cultivating something new, instead of growing something beautiful. So less being destructive and trying to get rid of and change things that you actually don't want, and more nurturing the things that you do. Just simply choose to understand that, yeah, that thing is there. That's okay. It's dealt with because I'm focused on doing what I know is going to work, what I know is the path to move me forward, instead of remaining attached to the situation that I'm sure that I no longer want. So let's close it out with this quote. It does not matter whether you love or hate. If your thoughts are latched onto the object of your emotions, your thought energy will be attuned to a certain frequency, and you will end up caught up by a pendulum and transferred to a corresponding lifeline where the object of your fixation is present in abundance. If you want to eradicate something from your life, all you have to do is stop thinking about it, pass it by with indifference, and it will disappear. To eliminate something from your life, ignore it. Do not avoid it. There is a difference. When you avoid something, it means you have let it into your personal space, but are now actively trying to get rid of it. To ignore something means not to react to it, and consequently not to experience its presence in your space. Super important distinction. To ignore something is to know that it's there and to not care, to not react, to not be bothered by it, because you know that by maintaining that state of awareness, by continuing to remain seated and to be soothed with that knowledge that I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, and as a consequence, that thing is going to go away. So there's nothing else that I need to do. There's nothing I need to do to make it go away. There's nothing I need to do to change it. There's nothing I need to do to fix it. That is very different than trying to avoid something. Avoiding something means there's a threat. This thing can hurt me. This thing can take something from me. This thing can do something to me that I don't want to happen. That's what you're doing when you're trying to avoid something. You're focusing on the possibility of that negative outcome. Ignoring something means that has nothing to do with me. I'm not giving it any meaning. I'm focusing on the things that I actually want. So ignore, but don't avoid, because the avoidance implies that there's something there. There's something there you don't want to be there. There's something there that you think is out of place, that doesn't belong. There's something that you have not accepted. If I'm ignoring something, that means, yes, I have accepted it. Remember, it's okay to accept that something is there, but also to accept that it's not your choice. So yeah, that can be a thing that's there, but that thing is not for me, because in order to avoid it, you have to be identified with its presence in your experience. That's what you're doing when you're trying to avoid something. If you can ignore something, that means that you understand there's nothing about it you need to change. It's allowed to exist. That is the acceptance. That thing has nothing to do with me. I'm not identified with it. So nothing to change about that. And this thing is not keeping me from having what I want because it has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to focus on it because it has no rightful place in my experience. That's why you can ignore it, because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about what you get to have. It may mean something about that old version of you. That's something for the old version of you to contend with. Good thing you're not that version of you anymore. But to go and try to avoid something means it poses a threat. It could harm you. You are so highly attached to it, and it is so important to you that this thing not come anywhere near you, that instead of putting your focus on the things that you should be focusing on, you are focusing on how to get rid of something that you are implying is still there, still real, still means something. That's what it means to not care about the opposite results, about the circumstances, about things taking time, about needing to be patient, any of these things. It doesn't actually matter when you understand that if there's something that I don't want, there's something I don't prefer, it's not what I choose, it's not my desire, then that's just that. There's nothing that has to be done with it other than that recognition. I don't want it, it's not mine. cool, I don't like when things happen for me this way. I'm gonna focus on things getting to happen for me this way. Actively trying to get rid of it means that there is something to be rid of. That's why trying to fight, trying to battle, being in opposition to pendulums, opposing thoughts, opposing circumstances, things not happening in your favor, things not working out for you, is exacerbating the problem. It's making it worse. That's why it continues to exist, and it only can continue to exist because you're feeding it your energy through that exchange, through the exchange of trying to get it to go away, or trying to change it, or trying to fix it. You're validating its existence in your reality. So accepting that it gets to exist is different from accepting its right to exist in your reality. In order to solidify that difference, in order to allow whatever it is that you don't want to be there to go away, ignore it. And it's not so much ignore the thing itself, because I know sometimes these are the things that can trip people up. So I'm gonna cover as many bases as possible. Ignore it and ignore the 3D and all of that stuff also does not mean that you cannot perceive it being there. It means ignore the importance of it. Don't give it weight. Take it off of the pedestal. Don't make it a big deal. If it is such a big deal in your mind to where you think, okay, I need to quickly revise this, I need to affirm over this, I need to figure out how to make this thing go away, it's already too important. If you're going down that line of thought of like, what am I gonna do about this? You've already made it too important. At that moment in time, when you recognize that that's something you're doing, automatically switch to, oh, I recognize that this is not a thing that I want. So, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna choose to be done with it. I'm just gonna choose that I don't care. I'm not bothered by it because it has nothing to do with me anymore, because I've obviously recognized that it's not my preference. I've obviously recognized that I don't want it. So that's for somebody else to deal with, but not me. Okay, so when you are in doubt, when or if you're in doubt because of what's happening in the 3D or how the process is playing out, what's happening on the bridge of incidents, whatever, I don't care. That's old news. That correlates to an old version of reality. That correlates to an old lifeline, an old version of me, who I am no longer being. Hello, I chose instantaneously in this moment that I'm not that person anymore. So now that has nothing to do with me. Only I get to decide. So I've decided I don't care. It's the way that I said it is. That's really all it takes. It's not this thing where it's there, obviously in your face, and you have to try to convince yourself that it's not, or you have to pretend that it's not. Just know that it truly doesn't mean anything, no matter how tangible it is, because it's just as real as whatever's going on in here. So if you continue to focus on that thing that's tangible, then you're gonna get more of that thing. If you continue to focus on what's going on up here, then that thing's gonna be made tangible. It works both ways. Nothing is really more real or less real, but understand that the catalyst for what becomes tangible is in here. It starts in here. So there's never anything that you're gonna be able to do about things that are already happening in the 3D. You're not gonna make it go away. You're not gonna change it, and you're not supposed to. You don't have to. Decide that it's not a big deal, and if you don't wanna see it, it will go away. It won't be in your awareness anymore. That's the difference between accepting something as a possibility, recognizing that creation is finished, and being the victim of something. Accepting something's right to exist in your presence, in your reality. And that's also the difference between avoiding something and ignoring something. Because what is there to be avoided? You put it there. You understand how you put it there through your attention. So do the opposite. Take your attention away from it. There's nothing to avoid because there's nothing there anymore. It goes away as soon as you stop focusing on it. So that's it. I want to discuss that a little bit deeper in depth because it sometimes can be a little bit of a hurdle, like I said, to understand some of this language. Like, what is a pendulum? And I don't ever want there to be an impression that like, oh, this is some thing outside of me that I need to fight or battle. Again, that is completely the antithesis of the point, is to not view these things as important, to understand the mechanism and how it works so that you can use it in your favor, so that you can take advantage of it and let it work for you the way that you want it to work. So you see the pendulum, you understand, okay, this is just a belief system that I kept feeding into. I put this thing here, I grew it, I don't have to wish that I didn't. I don't have to wish that it would go away. I can just simply stop feeding it. I can just simply stop caring. I can just simply recognize that, yeah, that thing is there and it exists and it is tangible. I'm gonna go where that's not true. I'm just gonna occupy a different sector of reality. So defeating the pendulum is actually counterintuitive. You defeat it by not trying to fight it, by not doing anything. because there's nothing to do. Because by you doing nothing, you imply that there's nothing that needs to go away because things are already the way that you want them to be. I hope that makes sense. Do you get what I'm saying by that? Defeating the pendulum is counterintuitive. Doesn't mean that you suit up. Don't put on the gear, don't put on your armor and try to square up and battle the pendulum. The easiest way, remember what I said at the beginning, the easiest way is not to try to fight the old man head on. Is to be like, hey, look at that. Dip in the other direction. Just quickly and calmly make your exit. And it won't be able to find you because the energetic signature doesn't match. You're not giving off that vibe anymore. You're not in the right state to even allow it to feed off of you. Anyway, understand that pendulums are not some big scary thing outside of you. If opposite results are happening in your reality, it's fine. That's the mechanism for how reality works, just trying to restore the balance. The easiest way to get things to show up in the way that you actually want them to show up is to be the version of you that you would be had things already been the way that you'd wanted them to be the whole entire time. Chill out, relax, accept that the 3D is really not that big of a deal. You're a big deal. What happens in here is a big deal. The way that you choose to see and perceive things is a big deal. That's what matters. Okay? And don't try to avoid. Don't try to fix. Just let it be. And you keep deciding to be the version of yourself that you want to be. All right, you guys, that's gonna do it for me today. I intend this message serves you well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments. If you're interested in working with me or checking out any of my other platforms, all that information will be in the description box below, or you can check my website at morebeing.co. And other than that, I love you all so much. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.